Hi folks, in this video I'm going to show you this control panel which I built for my HO scale model railway. It's one of a number of panels around the layout, but this one is by far the largest and most complex. It controls the main station area of my layout, which is known as Lorikeet, named after the very loud parrots that feed on the ironbark flowers out the window here. There are 3 platforms, just these 3 roads here. I say platforms, I haven't built actual physical platforms there yet, but it says platform on the panel, so one day I'll have to do it. And that leads to a double track main line, which heads off this way. This is the continuation down here. So imagine these 3 join up with these 3 here. And there's also a through main line down that way, as well as a number of sidings. And this arrivals road, which runs through here. Now I built this entire panel myself, mostly in the room where I'm standing now. The actual graphics of the panel I designed in Photoshop. The bit of wood that it's mounted on is a bit of plywood I found under my house. All of the wire, and there is an enormous amount of wire, is recycled. I found it in a box someone was throwing out. So the only things I've actually purchased new for this panel were the switches and the LEDs. Now I've color-coded all the switches to make it a bit easier to see what's going on. These plain silver switches control the points, and there is some quite complex point work through here. We've got 2 double slip points there. The red switches control the power to the track. So these are 3 position switches. Now I have 2 control circuits running on my layout so that you can use 2 separate controllers. In the middle is isolated. Up is controller number 1, down is controller number 2. Typically if there's a train sitting there, as there is in platform 1 at the moment, I leave it isolated. All the other switches I leave in the controller number 1 position if there's nothing sitting on that track at that time. The other colour of switch is white. There's a few of them sitting around here. They actually do absolutely nothing at the moment. There's a long-term plan to have some physical signals in place on this layout. However, I have no idea if I'll actually ever get time to do that. The other pretty obvious thing you'll notice is all these red lines drawn in boxes around the place, and they represent the power blocks to the track. So each one of those has a red switch in it, and that just shows the extent to which that switch controls. Now lastly, and I've dialed the exposure down a bit to make it easier to see this, we've got obviously 2 colours of LED here. There's orange ones and green ones, and the green ones are incredibly bright. It's not so obvious to the naked eye, but as you can see on the camera, they show up much brighter than everything else around. So these lights are point indicators. They indicate which direction the points are set, and all the 2 colours really indicate is that green is, in most cases, the horizontal direction across the panel, and orange is the 45-degree diagonal angle. And it just gives you a visual reference if you're standing on the other side of the room, so that you can see which way all the points are lying. You can see if I flick this set of points to the horizontal direction, it'll turn green. And then back to the ladder track, goes back to orange again. Alright, so I'll demonstrate a few of the operations that are possible with this yard. Now as you can see, there's a B-class sitting there with a nice eclectic 1980s scratch set in platform 1. We're going to be sending that out down the down main on controller 1. So all we have to do to get ready for that departure is flick the block switch up to controller 1, set the road. That is now right to go. Now we're also expecting a goods train coming in on the up main. We're going to send it straight through down onto the south main down here. Now that will be operating on controller 2, so we put all the relevant block switches down into the controller 2 position. Make sure we set the road, and both of those trains are now right to go. Okay, next we have an up pass arriving on controller 1. We're going to send it to platform 2. So flick those block switches back to 1, and then we just need to set all those points for a straight line into platform 2, so you can see we've got a direct line of green dots from the up main into 2 there. Now, because of the limited space I had here, there was no real space to put in sets of points down here to provide runaround facilities. So all loco hauled trains basically have to arrive, and then the pilot has to come out and pull the passenger cars off. There's not much of a prototype precedent for that in Victoria. There's plenty of places around the world where it does happen, however, but it actually does create a bit of extra operational interest. Now, to make that possible, because obviously the pilot is going to have to run into the platform where my mainline loco is already sitting, I put in these extra little switches here which actually divide the platforms in half. So we can now isolate just the end of platform 2, and the outer end of that track remains live for the shunter to come in. Now, the next train we're expecting is a short goods train, which we are going to send from the up main into the arrivals loop, and then the locomotive will cut off, run up here, and down to the southwest yard, which is sort of used as a layover area for locomotives. Now you can notice there's no point switches in this area, they're all just manual points. Alright, now we're going to use our Y-class yard pilot to release those passenger cars in platform 2. So it's coming from southwest yard. You'll notice sometimes these sets of points don't change the first time every time. That was a particularly bad example. Alright, and then points changed into 2 road. And then we're just going to run back out onto the up main with those passenger cars just to let the L-class out. Now I'm going to isolate the Y-class there because I don't want it going anywhere. Power back on to where the L-class is sitting. And then I'm just going to run it down onto the down main. Isolate the L-class there, power back onto the Y. Now I'm going to temporarily isolate the Y-class where it is. And we're going to run the L class down and stable it in southwest yard. Now, while we've got the Y class here, we're going to send it over and collect those goods wagons out of the arrivals road. So power back on to 2 road, set the points, and back up the ladder. Back into the arrivals road. And the Y class is now going to run all the way down here and push back into the southeast yard. Now, our next move is going to be a rail motor departure from platform 3. This will be formed by a Derm diesel electric rail motor and 200 MT, the Victorian Railway's only Brill rail motor trailer, which I kit bashed from a Strath Hobbies 75 class Brill rail motor trailer kit. So power on to 3 road, set the points, and we are clear to depart. Now I've got one last move before we sign off, and that is an up passenger train arriving into platform 1. So the number one thing I always forget is to set this set of points back, and then we're going to use this crossover here, which is made up of 2 separate switches. I know it's technically possible to do it with 1, but I found it to be very unreliable, ended up going with 2. And that is all clear for our arrival. So there you have it. Our last step is to make sure we isolate those locomotives there. I hope you enjoyed the video, and at least some of it hopefully made sense to someone out there. As you can see, the pilot loco still has a bit of work to do here, freeing up those locomotives down the end, but that's a job for the next shift now. Thank you for watching.